straight people really happy? Are they
Yeah.
really okay? Y'all, are you okay?
Hello and welcome to Cup of Queers. My name is Sean, he, him,
And I'm Lindsay, she, her.
and thank you so much for coming out for us today. Thank you so much for coming to listen. Today I mentioned that I am talking about insecurities, and this is in particular with,
Dating?
yeah, but it was intimacy issues.
Intimacy issues.
I mean, insecurities around intimacy is something that queer people deal with a lot. And I think that we don't get to talk about it enough because it's something that the world oftentimes wants us to feel insecure about. Sometimes it's something that the world isn't comfortable with us being comfortable with sometimes either. And when you are looking up to people in life and they disagree with the things that you need to feel comfortable with, a lot of that can carry into your adult life, whether or not you like that or not. I just wanted to bring it up today because I feel like it affects a lot of us within the queer community. And I just personally have continued to deal with it with dating people and trusting myself when I'm dating people. I feel like many of us lack the communication that allow us to grow like that. I don't know how else to describe it, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's great. I am super excited to hear what you have to say. I am very interested in how our childhoods and those like first relationships we have kind of shape us into how we are today. And you're right, so many of us have fear of intimacy or problem communicating our needs and things like that. And this is something that I've been working on a lot lately. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
So, something that I had thought of initially is the way that when we are going through puberty and when we are first like approached by people, oftentimes personally I would have people who were attracted to me and who wanted to like hit on me, but they would never actually go through with what they had initially, I don't know, insinuated to me. And when you feel as though people are just hitting on you to express a part of themselves that they are only comfortable to an extent, and then you feel as though you're somewhat like used in this situation, whether or not that's purposeful or not. Like, I'm not saying that that necessarily ever was, but you sometimes lack confidence when you are constantly being rejected when it comes to like real relationships. I know that many of us feel that when we are confronted with people who are simply using us for, our bodies or using us for their plaything to some degree because their mental games are something that they enjoy playing with. And I know that that sounds like really dark and whatever, but it's just that some people like to express themselves, and sometimes they don't know that they're expressing themselves in ways that hurt other people. So that's just what I think about that to begin with.
Yeah, no, I get that. I was actually thinking about being on the other end of like being the person who is like reaching out to people and then kind of pulling back a little bit and unsure. And for me, it was like when I was first thinking that I was a lesbian, but not 100% sure. So I don't know if there are a lot of people who, like you said, are just they're unable to follow through for whatever reason, like where they're at in their life, something else going on. I'm not sure.
It's just hard for you to build confidence in your sexuality and in like a society that already makes it difficult for you to build confidence with your sexuality to begin with. I think it really matters when you're growing up the way that people treat you with regards to your sexuality. And if they're like some of us who are not fortunate enough to have people who can help your sexuality grow in a way that makes you like a happy adult, it's difficult for you to formulate that into like real adult relationships sometimes because there's no way for you to know what a healthy relationship could look like. That's my feelings. I'm really nervous about this.
Well, don't say anything that you don't want to share or that you like feel is invading your personal boundary because
Thank you.
those are so important to have and we don't want to like break through those.
Appreciate that. I just think that there are so many hurdles when it comes to dating people, like such as bisexuals who have the option, if they were to advance on someone who is gay, you can't really even blame them for choosing to go with the more popular heterosexual standard that we have for other people because at the end of the day, like it's more comfortable for them, it's easier for them, and not something I can even like blame them for.
Or like lesbians are intimidated to date them because they're like, well, they could leave me for a man, or they like everybody. So I'll always be insecure that they're like looking at everybody they see. And so then it probably is, for multiple reasons, often easier to date who they would be expected to date, like you said.
So that's okay. That's a really good point that you make with like bisexual people in the first place with with gay community, with the gay community. I said gay community as though it was like a singular. Um, I just cannot agree more that like we have like the ability to do better for each other. We can like benefit each other in this world.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that we all have our struggles just getting into this community, if you know what I mean. Like first you have to come out, you have to find people who support you and understand you. And then we should really all be supporting each other, but oftentimes you find that the queer community can be the most difficult to find connections with because people do still get caught up in labels and your background and things like that. I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
No.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I'm like super passionate about is when I mean just again for me, like when I came out and I had married a man, people were immediately, telling me that I was bisexual. And if I felt like I was bisexual, I would be so proud and I would be like, absolutely, yep, I'm bi, I'm choosing to date a woman. But I didn't feel a connection to that label. And so I came out as a lesbian and I gave my reasons. I always felt like I had to explain myself. And
Yeah.
your label is your label. And I just feel like as queer people, we should be like, okay, cool. Like if I want to come out, if I tomorrow change my label to pan, people should be like, awesome, you do you. Instead of like being like, well, technically you're probably this because this is your past history, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
and I never like wanted to sound biphobic because it's not that at all, but there are so many women and probably men and whoever who end up being with someone because they feel like they have to be, and it doesn't mean that they really ever felt that way. So I'm just so passionate about, dude, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Do not worry, like at all. I promise we are doing great. And oh my gosh, I just had just like a really strong thought about something that I needed to like air.
Knew it.
And with regards to like the intimacy thing that I wanted to touch on, and I mean, labels are important and like labeling things for humans is just like an important thing that we need to do, I guess. I never made that rule. But with regards to like our bodies, I think that intimacy is such a challenge for queer people because when it comes down to like gay sex, I think that that is what straight people hate the most for some reason. And I think that that is oftentimes like at the core of what they hate about us is because they find it disgusting. And I think that that is a root of a lot of people's problems. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of fear of the unknown, and they don't understand how we work, and they don't feel the same way we do. Like for example, when I first came out, my best friend was like, "Well, I would never do that, so I don't really understand, but we can still be friends." And of course, if you listen to our last episode, you know that that's changed, but it's that whole like how are you doing that? How you're a man and you're attracted to another man? How does that work? How can you think about that? And there's so much that they just don't understand. And I just feel like if people would sit down and have a conversation with us and just be open-minded and realize that we all have the same desire to connect with other people and to have intimacy, even if we're kind of afraid of it. And it's really the same thing as how they feel about their opposite sex partner. It's
Yeah.
just that we're choosing to be, not choosing, you know what I'm talking about. We are attracted to the same sex, and that's all there is to it.
Okay, this is gonna get like really philosophical, but at the end
Here
of
we
the
go.
day, like, are these straight people really satisfied with their lives if they're actually just worrying about sex? Because if there's one thing that like I've learned about the straight population, it is that sex oftentimes is the key issue about what makes them so problematic for them and people around them. Because when you make women objects, when you make sex such a priority for masculinity and representing who is the top dog type dude or like the hot girl mentality, and when we give sex that kind of power, and when we take it like away from the like love aspect of a relationship, it just feels really gross to me.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely I have been so open about this. I spent most of my life being with men, and like there is so much that I learned being with a woman that didn't make sense to me when I looked back on like straight sex.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And I just I mean, I'm still probably learning things, but looking back, it's like, oh, I really felt like I needed to do it this way and think that way and look this way and sound this way and dress this way. And there really is like my question is the same as yours. Are straight people really happy? Are they
Yeah.
really okay? Y'all, are you okay?
Straight people listening, are you okay?
Let us know. Reach out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think if we want to like dismantle growing up and learning about your sexuality as queers, I think we also need to understand like the counterpart of growing up with heterosexuality, and inevitably like the way that they understand sexuality and how they force it upon many of us definitely is going to affect how we are going to grow as well. So I think that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I agree. Oh my God, my brain isn't working.
That's okay. Yeah, well, and I mean, if you want to take this all the way back to like middle school and the times, especially when it was just out in the open, when men would make women objects just openly and casually, like there's no more of an accepting time than middle school boys being disturbing individuals.
hmm I
I
agree.
mean, like this inevitably is going to affect how, I mean, women view each other if they were to ever have a lesbian relationship. And I mean, men are just, over here chilling, thinking that they have like everything going on. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Oh, okay. Well, that could be a whole other thing.
I don't know. I mean, when like society treats you like you're superior because you're better at like throwing and catching a football, like I think we all should reevaluate how we're raising people.
Well, aren't you better?
Oh my
Oh,
God.
it's actually so interesting that you are talking that way because you have like this almost innate, like men have this innate like self-confidence and sense of like entitlement. And
Sure.
I don't think all of us are, this is definitely generalizing, but I come into this like, I really do have to be a certain way and I need to act this way and do all these things to have value. And I have spent my whole life trying different ways to kind of build up my value so that men would appreciate me and think that I was a good catch, right? And
Yeah.
now that I'm dating a woman, I feel that so much less, but I still struggle with things that my partner doesn't because she's been out a lot longer and she's been with women and she was never really given that whole, hey, you need to marry a man and you need to do this and you need to do that. And it's just so interesting to hear you saying that. You're like, I'm the, we're the better species because we can throw a football better. And it's just like, it's mind boggling.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're able to get something out of this. I mean, I love the fact that we are like hanging out because it makes this interesting for me because I always like understanding from the perspective of someone who isn't from, my generation, my point of view, I guess to say. I think what is going to make this show interesting for people is because, there are people out there who might listen to this like me, who have been in my skin for a while and are able to pinpoint intimacy problems with relativity to our queer identity and our physical identity. And then there can be people who are like your age or are not out very long or are just in a position where they just aren't comfortable with understanding and aren't ready to understand. And all of that is great and all of that is welcome. So yeah, I think that's the most beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean with people like me in a position of being comfortable and I know you mentioned your girlfriend, but when we are like entering these relationships or considering entering relationships with people who are less experienced emotionally, I think it's interesting because I have felt that people are more willing to judge gay individuals who are not in a relationship very long because many of
Mhm.
us just don't have access to, dating. And I mean, especially during COVID, come on, people. But I think it's interesting that I get that criticism rather than me not having sex with enough people. I think for some reason we gays like hold the like length of a relationship higher, in comparison to our body count. So I don't know.
Interesting. I
That's something I
actually,
felt.
that's like a big question of mine, and that's something that my partner and I talk about a lot is how in the lesbian community, it's like where it used to be so glorified to have a high body count. And do you feel like that has changed, or is that still going on in the gay community?
Well, I mean, for men, it might be different because men are just so ready to go on their first dates and fuck around because that's, I guess, what we're about. I mean, that's like our community, I guess. I'm not saying that that's something we're necessarily proud of, but whatever. I mean, we're having fun, so
Well, we talked about how, I mean, sure, like straight people have sex all the time too, right? But we talked about how, like, I never had the whole sleeping around, just swapping partners type thing because I came out so late and just went right into this serious relationship. But like, my partner did because she came out in college and was around all these queer people. And we talked about how there's this feeling of like, finally, I'm no longer in my parents' house. I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And there's just this crazy feeling of like freedom and you can experiment and you can be yourself. And I mean, that's this whole thing that straight people never do because they're starting to date in like middle school or whenever. And by the time they're in college, like, sure, they still sleep around, but they've kind of gotten that whole thing out of their systems. Whereas we're like 20, 30, and we're like, oh my gosh, there's other queer people around. Let's do this.
I'm so glad that you're mentioning that because I think so many of us feel when we're in our 20s in particular, and shout out to my 20 somethings out there, we get to this like phase, and many of us, like myself, haven't been in a long relationship. And whether that be like because I've been busy, yes, whether that be because I didn't have the opportunity. Yeah, but like at the end of the day, when it comes to comparing yourself to straight people, yeah, that like is in the back of your mind.
Ooh, so do you feel like you're like behind?
I mean, it's something I don't like to entertain, but I think it's one of those creepy, paranoid voices in the back of your mind because inevitably you're going to be friends with like a straight couple or straight people who have been in a relationship or even like married, And
Mhm.
so when it gets to that point, it's like, yes, like I'm only young once, so should I really even care about this? Because these people are busy having long-term relationships and following them around the world when in reality they could be finding themselves. I don't know. I think that's another place where like straight people make mistakes is that they get in these relationships early and they let them decide the course of their life. But at the end of the day, those cute rom-coms are still fucking cute and still still burns a little bit.
Yeah. Oh no, I totally agree. And they have so much more, straight people have so much more of that societal pressure to do things on a timeline. And we still get it. Like you said, we hang out with people who, and I was there. I did the whole timeline. I married a guy, had a kid, bought a house, did all the things. And so now I'm
Mhm.
starting over at, 31, 32, and not worrying about that timeline anymore. But I do feel like straight people have so much pressure to do that just the right way. And they are, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what's for them and that's what they want to do. But they do it so young and they miss out on, like you said, traveling and meeting interesting people and doing all those things. So it's just interesting to
Do
see
you
how
think that
that
this
goes.
I think that this ties back though with like the whole like sex thing that they seem to like prioritize within the context of a relationship. And so I think it's interesting that you say that because we mentioned it earlier that sex is such an important part of straight relationships. It is, their bread and butter, so to speak, rather than like emotional understanding. And I think that they're just much easier to rate relationships based on physical appearance. And
Yeah, I
so
agree.
when like we were gonna say that straight people when they age, they're just less desirable, just like less of everything. I don't think that it's like a stretch for me to say that like straight people are ageist like anyone a little bit. I think we just live in a pretty ageist society, and I
Mm.
think that they definitely play into that in
Yeah, I
particular.
agree. I agree.
Mhm.
And there's the whole like men, they have their wife, and then as their wife like has babies and ages, starts to go gray, then he goes and gets like a newer model.
Yeah, yeah.
Because men can age, but women can't.
Well, and I mean, how much how much do you see like in popular media the like rich woman going out and like getting someone who's like 30 years younger than her because that's just like unheard of. But how many fucking times do I need to see some like 40 or 50-year-old dating like almost a child?
Okay. Okay, but let's talk about this. Men don't care if women have brains, and women care if men have brains. So
Mm.
no 50-year-old rich woman is like, I want an 18-year-old, maybe for like a one night stand or like just a little side piece or something. But no 30 or 50-year-old is like, sure, you can come live in my house and just be a complete dumb
Oh my
child and
gosh.
I'll tolerate it. Whereas men are like, I don't care, she's hot.
We are like unlocking the inner humanity. We're
I know.
unlocking straight humanity right here.
We seriously are.
Oh my gosh. This has felt like a digression, but my favorite kind of digression.
I
I hope
know.
I hope that people that are listening are like following at this point, but like I don't care. Like they are probably having a good time. I hope they are.
I hope so. I mean, we're kind of making light of it. We've laughed several times, it's just life. There's definitely some weird like double standards and expectations and stuff that, like you said, we're unlocking them here. We're just bringing it to surface. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm like Nicolas Cage or some shit. Watch out.
That's right. Mm, mm. I do love that
Um,
movie. Okay, I think that's all we have for today. Our next episode, my partner Stacy will be joining us. I'm not 100% sure what we'll be talking about, but Sean is super excited to get to know my partner a little more.
yeah, no, I just want to like witness this. That's all.
Yeah, we will wing it and we'll see what comes up in our conversation, but it will probably be a blast.
Amazing. Yeah, as always.
All right, are you ready for our cheers?
Yes, yes. And to all who are listening, hold one up for us if you're in the mode. All right, all right. Thank you so much for listening. I love you guys from Cup of Queers. This is Sean, he, him.
And Lindsay, she, her.
Cheers.
Cheers.